Commander Jack Harrison stared at the flickering screen in disbelief. The distress signal had been repeating for 3 days now, growing weaker each time. His fingers drummed against a metal console as he listened to the strange, musical tones that his computer was barely able to translate. The Kalari were dying. Jack had heard stories about them during his academy days. Beautiful creatures that looked like living starlight, with skin that glowed in soft blues and purples. They could power entire space stations just by touching the right connections. The Galactic Union had loved them for that ability, treating them like precious resources rather than people. But everything changed 6 months ago when the solar storms hit their home system. The radiation did something to them, twisted their natural abilities into something unpredictable. Instead of providing clean energy, they now caused massive power surges that could destroy a ship's electronics in seconds. The Union's response was swift and brutal. Within weeks, every Kalari was loaded onto transport ships and told to leave Union space forever. No trials, no attempt to help them control their change abilities. Just exile. "Sir, we're picking up more signals," Lieutenant Tom Mitchell called out from a station. The young officer's face was pale as he read the data. 47 ships total. Most of them are barely holding together. Jack walked over to look at the scanner readings. Each blip represented thousands of lives. Men, women, children who had done nothing wrong except survive a cosmic disaster. Their ships were ancient transports, never meant for long journeys between stars. Life support systems failing. Engines breaking down. Hulls developing cracks that let the cold of space seep in. How long do they have? Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. Tom swallowed hard. At current rates of deterioration, maybe 2 weeks. 3 if they're lucky. The communications officer, a red-haired woman named Katie Ross, looked up from her console. "Sir, I'm also detecting Union patrol ships in the area. 3 destroyers holding position about 50,000 kilometers away." Jack felt his jaw tighten. The Union ships were there to make sure nobody helped. Any vessel that approached the dying Kalari fleet would be marked as harboring galactic fugitives. It meant economic sanctions, blocked trade routes, and possible military action against their home colonies. For most species in the galaxy, it wasn't worth the risk. The Union controlled the major trade networks, the hyperspace routes, the banking systems that kept civilizations running. Cross them, and your people could find themselves cut off from the rest of the galaxy. But humans were different. They were still new to this cosmic neighborhood, still building their place among the stars. They had less to lose, and perhaps more to gain from doing what was right instead of what was profitable. Jack thought about his own journey to the stars. His grandfather had been a refugee once, fleeing a war-torn Earth with nothing but hope for a better life. Other countries could have turned him away, but someone had taken a chance on a desperate man with a family to feed. "Sir," Katie's voice broke through his thoughts. "I'm getting a direct transmission from one of the Kalari ships. They're asking if anyone can hear them." The bridge fell silent. Through the static and interference, they could hear something that needed no translation. Fear, desperation, the sound of people who knew they were going to die far from home, surrounded by the empty darkness of space. Jack looked around at his crew. Tom was barely 25, fresh out of training, and still believing that good people could make a difference in the galaxy. Katie had joined the human fleet to explore new worlds, not to watch civilizations die, while she stood by and did nothing. Chief Engineer Danny Foster, who had spent his whole career fixing broken things, was staring at the scanner readings like they were a puzzle he could solve if he just tried hard enough. These weren't hardened soldiers or politicians. They were explorers, scientists, engineers who had signed up to push the boundaries of human knowledge and maybe make some new friends along the way. The Union patrol ships sat there like silent threats, waiting to see what the humans would do. Their commanders probably expected the typical response. A few token messages of sympathy, maybe some emergency supplies dropped at a safe distance, then a quick retreat to avoid complications. But Jack Harrison had not spent 5 years building humanity's reputation among the stars just to watch innocent people die, because it was politically convenient. He turned to his navigation officer, a steady man named Bill Wright, who had never questioned a direct order in 15 years of service. Bill, set a course for the Kalari fleet. Maximum speed. The bridge erupted in nervous chatter, but Jack held up his hand for silence. He opened a channel to all human ships in the area, knowing that his next words would either save lives or start a war that humanity wasn't ready to fight. The moment Jack's ship entered the Kalari fleet perimeter, alarms started blaring across every deck. Lights flickered, computers crashed, and the artificial gravity system hiccuped so hard that half the crew grabbed onto the nearest wall to keep from floating. What the hell is happening to my ship? Danny Foster shouted from the engine room through the intercom. His voice was nearly drowned out by the sound of sparking electronics and emergency systems kicking in. Lieutenant Tom Mitchell was frantically pressing buttons on his console, but nothing seemed to work properly. Sir, all our scanning equipment is going crazy. I can't get a clear reading on anything. Jack gripped his command chair as another power surge made the bridge light strobe like a disco ball. This was exactly why the Union had exiled the Kalari. Whatever the solar storms had done to them, their presence turned advanced technology into expensive paperweights. But Jack had made his choice, and he wasn't backing down now. "Katie, can you reach any of the Kalari ships?" he called out. The communications officer was working with equipment that kept switching between different languages and sometimes just made random beeping sounds. "I'm trying, sir, but our translators can't handle the interference." "Wait, I think I'm getting something." A new voice crackled through the speakers, speaking heavily accented English. The Kalari had obviously been listening to human broadcasts to learn their language. "Human vessel, you must leave immediately. We are dangerous to your technology. Please, we do not wish to harm anyone else." The voice sounded tired, defeated. Jack could hear the weight of months of rejection and fear in those simple words. "This is Commander Jack Harrison of the Human Exploration Fleet. We're here to help. Can you tell us what you need?" There was a long pause. When the voice returned, it was filled with disbelief. "You want to help us? Even though we are destroying your ship's systems." "Our ship is tougher than it looks," Jack lied smoothly. Behind him, Tom was hitting his console with his fist to make it work properly. "How many people are on your ships? What's your current status?" The answer made everyone on the bridge go quiet. 53,000 Kalari refugees spread across 47 ships. Most of their vessels had lost primary power. Their food production systems had failed weeks ago, and they were running on emergency rations that would last maybe 5 more days. Worst of all, their people were getting sick from something Kalari called the fading. Dr. Robert Hayes, the ship's medical officer, had been listening from the medical bay. His voice came through the intercom, professional but concerned. "Commander, I need to examine some of these people as soon as possible. From what they're describing, it sounds like their biology is breaking down." Jack made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the shuttle bays. We're taking on refugees. The next 6 hours were pure chaos. Human shuttle pilots, led by veteran Captain Lisa Brooks, made trip after trip between the ships. Each time they brought Kalari refugees aboard, the ship's systems went haywire. But Danny Foster and his engineering team worked miracles, keeping everything running. The Kalari themselves were nothing like Jack had expected. Instead of the glowing, ethereal beings from the old Academy files, these refugees looked faded and weak. Their natural bioluminescence flickered like dying candles, and many of them could barely walk without help. Dr. Hayes worked around the clock, examining the new arrivals. What he found was disturbing. The Kalari were essentially living batteries, and they were running out of charge. Without access to specific energy frequencies they needed, their cellular structure was slowly breaking apart. "It's like watching someone die of starvation," he explained to Jack during a brief break between examinations. But instead of food, they need electromagnetic energy in very specific patterns. Energy that their own ships can't provide anymore because of the radiation damage. Meanwhile, the Union patrol ships have been joined by a full battlecruiser. Commodore Stevens, a career military officer known for following orders without question, sent increasingly urgent messages demanding that the humans abandon the rescue operation. "Commander Harrison, you are in violation of Union Directive 847 Alpha. Cease all contact with the exiled population and withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Jack deleted the message without responding. He had bigger problems to worry about. The refugee camp they established in the shuttle bays was heartbreaking. Kalari families huddled together. Parents trying to comfort children who didn't understand why the other species in the galaxy suddenly hated them. Many of the adults had been important people in their society before the exile. Scientists, artists, teachers, engineers who had contributed to galactic civilization for generations. Now they were homeless, dying slowly in the cargo holds of human ships while their former allies threatened anyone who showed them kindness. But something unexpected was happening among the human crew. Instead of complaining about the malfunctioning equipment or the overcrowded conditions, they were adapting. Katie Ross had figured out how to communicate by using simple hand signals when the translators failed. Tom Mitchell had developed a system for manually operating the navigation computers when the Kalari presence made them glitch. Most importantly, the humans weren't treating their guests like dangerous refugees. They were treating them like people who needed help. The mining colony of New Manchester had never seen anything like it. Within 48 hours, the quiet settlement of 8,000 humans had swelled to nearly 60,000 as refugee ships continued arriving from across the sector. Director Michael Clark stood in his office, staring out the window at the sprawling tent city that had sprung up around the main settlement. Kalari families were everywhere, their faded bioluminescence creating a strange twilight glow across the landscape even during the day. "This is insane," he muttered to himself. "The Union is going to cut us off completely." His assistant, a young woman named Jenny Palmer, knocked on his door. "Sir, the colonists are asking for another town meeting. They want to vote on making this permanent." Michael rubbed his temples. He had already received 3 threatening messages from Union headquarters. The latest one made it clear that any colony harboring the Kalari would lose all trade agreements, supply shipments, and military protection. For a mining operation on the edge of known space, that was essentially a death sentence. But the colonists didn't seem to care about the practical realities. Led by mine foreman William Turner and the local school teacher Janet Porter, they had already started organizing food distribution and medical care for the refugees. The humans were treating this like a community project instead of a political crisis. Down in the main engineering center, Danny Foster was having the strangest week of his career. Every time he thought he had figured out how to work around the Kalari interference, something new would break. Lights would suddenly become 10 times brighter, then go completely dark. The water purification system kept switching between producing perfectly clean water and colored liquid that looked like fruit punch. "It's like they're trying to help," he explained to his assistant, Pete Morris, while they worked on the power grid. "But they don't understand how our stuff works, so they keep making it worse." Pete wiped sweat from his forehead as another power surge made the lights flicker. Maybe we should ask them what they think they're doing? It was such a simple idea that Danny felt stupid for not thinking of it sooner. Most species in the galaxy just try to build shields and barriers to keep the Kalari effect away. But what if instead of fighting the interference, they worked with it? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Janet Porter had set up a makeshift school in the community center, where Kalari children were learning alongside human kids. The young Kalari were picking up English incredibly fast, but more importantly, they seemed to be learning something else. "Watch this," 8-year-old Amy Cooper told her mother, pointing at a broken tablet that had stopped working when the refugees arrived. She was sitting next to a Kalari child about her age, whose skin was glowing a soft blue color. The Kalari child, whose name roughly translated to Bright Song of Morning, placed his small hand on the tablet. Instead of the usual shower of sparks and system failures, the device hummed quietly and came back to life. "How did you do that?" Amy asked in wonder. Bright Song of Morning smiled shyly. "You show me the breathing thing your teacher does. When I breathe like humans, the buzzing in my head gets quiet, and then I can feel what the machine wants instead of what I want it to do." Dr. Hayes had been studying the Kalari biology for weeks, but it took a conversation with the children to understand what was really happening. The radiation hadn't just changed their energy output. It had made them hypersensitive to electromagnetic fields. They were trying to regulate and improve every electronic device they encountered, but their alien instincts were incompatible with human technology. However, When the young Kalari learned human meditation and emotional control techniques from Janet's classes, they could consciously direct their abilities instead of letting them run wild. The first real test came when the colony's main reactor started overloading. Danny and his team had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to prevent a complete meltdown that would leave everyone in the dark and cold. "We're losing containment on Fusion Chamber 3, Pete reported, his voice tight with stress. "If we can't stabilize in the next hour, we'll have to do an emergency shutdown. That would mean no power for life support, no heat during the brutal nights when temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees, and no way to run the medical equipment, keeping some of the sicker Kalari refugees alive." Janet Porter arrived at the reactor facility with a group of Kalari adults and children who had been practicing the new control techniques. "Danny, let's try something. What's the worst that could happen?" Danny looked at the warning lights flashing across his control panels. "Well, we could all die in a massive explosion. Or we could all die slowly when the reactor shuts down," Janet pointed out practically. The Kalari formed a circle around the reactor's main control console, led by an elder whose name meant wisdom that flows like rivers. They placed their hands on the various interfaces and closed their eyes. Danny watched his instruments with fascination and terror as the reactor's chaotic energy readings began to smooth out. The dangerous spikes and valleys in the power output gradually transformed into a steady control flow that was actually more efficient than the reactor's original design. "Incredible," he whispered. "They're not just stopping the overload. They're optimizing the entire system." Within an hour, the reactor was running better than it had since the day it was installed. The colony's power grid was more stable, more efficient, and producing 30% more energy than before. But their success came at a cost. The next morning, Union Commodore Stevens arrived with battle cruiser and 2 destroyer escorts. Commodore Stevens stood on the bridge of his battle cruiser, watching New Manchester through the main view screen like a hawk studying its prey. The mining colony looked peaceful enough from orbit, with its cluster of buildings and the sprawling refugee camps surrounding it. But Stevens knew better than to trust appearances. "Sir, we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the surface," his tactical officer reported. Lieutenant Commander Brooks was a by-the-book officer who had served with Stevens for 5 years. "Their power output is significantly higher than what a colony this size should be producing." Stevens frowned. The Kalari were supposed to be a drain on any civilization that harbored them. Their uncontrolled abilities should have been causing system failures and blackouts across the entire settlement. Instead, the colony was practically glowing with organized energy. "Open a channel to the surface," he ordered. Director Michael Clark's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. Behind him, Stevens could see humans and Kalari working side by side in what appeared to be some kind of joint command center. "Director Clark, I am Commodore Stevens of the Union Fleet. You have 24 hours to surrender all Kalari refugees to Union custody. Failure to comply will result in immediate sanctions and possible military action." Michael's jaw tightened. "Commodore, these people are not prisoners. They're refugees who have committed no crimes. We will not be turning anyone over to you." Stevens cut the transmission with an angry gesture. In his 15 years of service, no backwater colony had ever defied a direct Union order. These humans clearly needed to learn about consequences. Down on the surface, the colonists were preparing for the worst. William Turner had organized the miners into work crews that were building emergency shelters deeper underground. Janet Porter was coordinating with the Kalari to move their families to safer locations. But everyone knew that if Stevens decided to attack, their small settlement wouldn't stand much of a chance against Union warships. "There has to be something we can do," Amy Cooper said to her new friend Bright Song of Morning as they watched the adults rushing around in preparation. "The grown-ups are all scared, but they're trying not to show it." Bright Song's skin flickered in patterns that Amy was starting to recognize as emotions, worry mixed with determination. "My grandmother says our people have been waiting for someone who would not fear us. Maybe this is why we survived the journey through space." That evening, wisdom that flows like rivers called together all the adult Kalari in the settlement. The elderly female's voice was weak, but clear as she addressed her people in their musical language. "Dr. Hayes, who had been working closely with the refugees, provided translation for the humans who had gathered to listen. She says that for too long, her people had been afraid of their own abilities. They let the radiation change them, and then let fear control what they became. But living with humans has taught them that being different doesn't have to mean being dangerous. The Kalari elder continued speaking, her bioluminescence growing brighter with each word. She's saying that tomorrow, when a Union attacks, her people will not hide underground like criminals. They will stand with their human friends and show the galaxy what cooperation looks like instead of fear. Danny Foster wasn't sure the plan would work, but he had to admit it was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to shield the colony's systems from Kalari interference, they were going to embrace it completely. Every power line, every computer network, every piece of technology in New Manchester would be connected to a Kalari partner. It's like turning the entire colony into one giant organism, he explained to Michael Clark as they worked through the night preparing. Their abilities can regulate and enhance our technology, but only if we stop trying to control everything ourselves. The attack came at dawn, just as Stevens had promised. 3 Union warships descended from orbit, their weapons charging with enough energy to level half the colony. Stevens' voice echoed across New Manchester's communication system with the arrogance of someone who had never been challenged. This is your final warning. Surrender the Kalari refugees immediately, or face the consequences of defying the Union. Michael Clark stepped outside the main administration building, looking up at the ships hovering overhead. Around him, human colonists stood shoulder to shoulder with their Kalari friends. Children who'd been playing together just days ago now held hands as they faced an uncertain future. Commodore Stevens, Michael said into his communicator, the people of New Manchester reject your ultimatum. These refugees are under our protection. The first energy beam lands down from Stevens' flagship, aimed directly at the colony's main power station. It should have been enough to cripple their entire infrastructure and force immediate surrender. Instead, something impossible happened. The beam struck the power station and simply disappeared, absorbed into the building's structure like water, soaking into sand. A moment later, every light in the colony blazed twice as bright as before. The defensive shields that Danny and his team had cobbled together from mining equipment suddenly hummed with more energy than their designers had ever imagined possible. What the hell? Stevens muttered from his bridge. His tactical officer was staring at her instruments in confusion. Sir, our weapon discharge was completely absorbed, not reflected or deflected. Absorbed, and the colony's power readings just doubled. Stevens ordered a full barrage from all 3 ships. Dozens of energy beams rained down on New Manchester like artificial lightning. But each attack only made the colony stronger. The Kalari refugees had linked their abilities with every system in the settlement, turning the entire place into a massive energy converter that transformed hostile attacks into useful power. From the Union ships, it looked like magic. From the ground, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We did it, Bright Song whispered to Amy as they watched the light show overhead. We're not broken anymore. The news of New Manchester's impossible defense spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Trader Captain Peter Adams had been delivering supplies to a nearby system when he witnessed a Union attack. His recordings of energy beams being absorbed and converted into colony power were soon playing on every news network from the core worlds to the outer rim. Within a week, everything changed. The first ship to arrive wasn't military or government. It was a battered cargo hauler carrying 300 Zarathi refugees, the telepathic species that the Union had declared too dangerous for civilized space. Their captain, a nervous human named Rick Donovan, who had been smuggling refugees for months, could barely believe his eyes when New Manchester Traffic Control actually welcomed him. "You're sure it's okay for us to land?" he asked over the radio, his voice shaking. These folks read minds whether they want to or not. Most places shoot at us before we even get close. Janet Porter, who had become the unofficial refugee coordinator, smiled as she responded, "Captain Donovan, we've got kids down here who can make our computers sing opera and turn weapons fire into extra electricity for movie night. A few telepaths aren't going to scare us." The Zarathi refugees were different from the Kalari, but the pattern was the same. What other species saw as a dangerous invasion of privacy, humans treated as an interesting communication method. Dr. Hayes discovered that Zarathi telepathy worked both ways, and soon human colonists were learning to share thoughts and emotions directly with their new neighbors. Amy Cooper, now 10 years old and fluent in 3 alien languages, became something of a celebrity when reporters arrived to cover the story. She was interviewed while sitting between Bright Song of Morning and a young Zarathi girl, whose name translated to Quiet Thoughts Like Rain. "It's not scary at all," Amy explained to confused journalist. "Quiet Thoughts doesn't want to know my private stuff any more than I want to know hers. We just share the happy things, like when we find something really cool or when we figure out a hard problem together." The reporter, a seasoned professional named Helen Wright, who had covered wars and political scandals across the galaxy, found herself struggling to understand what she was seeing. But surely there must be conflicts? Problems with so many different species living together? Amy considered this seriously. Well, sometimes the grown-ups argue about how to organize things. And last week there was a big fight because someone ate the last of the chocolate cake without asking. But mostly we just help each other. More ships arrived every day. The Moss people, whose plant-based technology had been dismissed as primitive by the Union, brought incredible advances in food production and atmospheric control. The Crystal Singers, exiled for their ability to shatter certain metals with their voices, turned out to be amazing at precise construction work when they learned to modulate their natural abilities. Danny Foster found himself leading the most diverse engineering team in galactic history. Humans worked alongside beings of living light, sentient plants, and creatures that communicated through harmonic frequencies. Their joint projects were producing technology that surpassed anything the Union had ever developed. "We're not just solving their problems," he explained to Director Clark during one of their weekly progress meetings. "They're teaching us things we never would have figured out on our own. The Kalari showed us how to make our power systems more efficient. The Zarathi are helping us develop computers that can anticipate what we need. The Crystal Singers are teaching us construction techniques that can build stronger structures using half the materials." But the real test came 6 months later, when Union President Crawford arrived personally with an entire fleet. Crawford was a career politician who had built his reputation on maintaining order and stability across thousands of worlds. The idea of a single human colony defying Union authority and harboring every species of refugee in known space was a direct challenge to everything he believed in. He expected to find chaos, overcrowded settlements, failing infrastructure, conflicts between incompatible species, and humans begging for Union assistance to solve the problems they had created. Instead, he found the most prosperous and advanced settlement he had ever seen. New Manchester had grown into a small city of nearly 200,000 inhabitants representing dozens of species. The streets were clean and well-lit, powered by Kalari-enhanced energy systems. The buildings were constructed using Crystal Singer techniques that made them both beautiful and incredibly strong. Parks filled with Moss People gardens provided fresh air and food for everyone. Most shocking of all, there was no visible government structure. No police force, no military garrison, no administrative bureaucracy. The different communities seemed to organize themselves naturally, with humans serving as facilitators and mediators when conflict arose. "This is impossible," Crawford muttered his aide as they toured the settlement. "You cannot have this many different species living together without strict control and regulation." His guide was Michael Clark, who had evolved from reluctant colony director to something like a mayor of the galaxy's most diverse city. "Mr. President, when people are treated as valuable contributors instead of problems to be managed, they tend to act like valuable contributors." Crawford's offer was generous by Union standards: full membership, technology sharing agreements, and protected status for all the refugees currently living in human space. In return, humanity would acknowledge Union authority and agree to operate within established galactic law. "We appreciate the offer," Michael replied politely, "but we're not interested in joining your empire. However, any species that want a fresh start is welcome to join us." As Crawford's fleet prepared to leave, they passed dozens of ships heading in the opposite direction. Word had spread that there was a place in the galaxy where being different was considered an advantage rather than a curse. The refugees kept coming, and humanity kept welcoming them. The galaxy had rejected them all, but humans had shown them something better than acceptance. They had shown them partnership. The age of the Refugee Alliance had begun, and it would change everything.